Hi, everybody. Today we are going to be looking at chapter 9 on motivation. We'll look at some motivation theories, lots of different theories as to what motivates us to do the things that we do. We'll look at the specific motive of hunger, the need to belong, and then a little bit with motivation at work. And I love this, right? What do you think? Should we get started on that motivation research or not? Right? What is it that motivates us to get going on things? That's what we'll be looking at in this chapter. So starting with a definition, right? What is a motive? What is motivation? A motive is any kind of specific need or desire, such as hunger, thirst, achievement. The list goes on and on and on. Anything that's going to prompt a goal-directed behavior. All motives are triggered by some kind of stimulus, a bodily condition or a feeling. When that stimulus induces some kind of goal-directed behavior, we say that we have motivated a person. So motivation is the driving force which helps us to achieve goals that we have, right? It pushes us to take some kind of action. So motivation and emotions, which we'll cover in the next chapter, push us to take an action. So what we'll look at first in this chapter is where does that energy or drive or direction or like push come from? What are some of the different theories that can explain what might motivate us? We'll look at some of those kind of general concepts and then a couple of specific motives that play a big role in our lives. So starting with kind of a basic theory, and psychology is nothing but theories, of course, right? We have so many different theories for everything. But if we start off by looking at the idea of drives, a drive is a state of tension or arousal that is going to motivate behavior. From this perspective, from the drive reduction theory, we're motivated to do things to reduce a state of bodily tension or arousal, thereby returning us to like homeostasis or balance. So if we are balanced and everything is kind of neutral, we wouldn't be motivated to do a whole lot. So according to this, we have some kind of state of tension, like we're hungry, so we eat something because that creates a state of tension. We're tired, so we go to sleep, right? You are doing something in order to get us back to balance. In other words, it's kind of like a very basic idea in a sense, right? That we wouldn't do anything if we didn't feel that state of tension or arousal. And this obviously does a better job of explaining some of the kind of more basic motives or drives that we might have, but it is one very popular theory that we do things in order to return ourselves back to a level of balance. Another theory has to do with arousal, right? So we, from this perspective, we seek an optimal level of arousal. And the tricky part of this is that every single person has a different level of arousal that they prefer. There's different levels of arousal that are fitting for each situation or each task at hand. And arousal here, we're talking more like alertness, like a state of emotional, intellectual, or physical activity, right? If we were bored, for example, we might turn on the TV or take a nap. If we're tired, we might get up and go on a walk or drink a cup of coffee, right? That we're constantly trying to seek an optimal level of arousal. Think about caffeine. Speaking of coffee, right? Like there's kind of that sweet spot where you drink enough caffeine to be awake and alert and productive, but not so much that you're like jittery and shaky and can't focus, or not enough where it didn't do anything. So there's kind of that optimal level where we're going to try and find that best level of arousal necessary to perform whatever given task that we're trying to do. So again, another kind of basic theory, but it does definitely explain some situations. Each one kind of covers its own set of situations, and then all together they probably cover what motivates us to do the things that we do. Another big theory is, are we motivated from within or from outside of ourselves? And of course, like everything else in psychology, it can be both, right? So if we are intrinsically motivated, then we do a behavior because we enjoy the behavior. If we're extrinsically motivated, we do a behavior to get a reward or maybe avoid a punishment. So maybe you really love reading, right? If you love to read, you're going to read because you enjoy reading. That would be it's intrinsically motivated. You do a behavior because you enjoy it. Kids like to play because playing itself is fun, right? So you're doing a behavior because the behavior itself is something that you enjoy. On the other side of that, extrinsic motivation is when you do something for a reward or to avoid a punishment. So let's say, for example, you vacuum the house, not because you like vacuuming or you want it to be clean, but you get money for completing your chores, right? Or you get candy for getting a question right in class, right? So you're extrinsically motivated when you do something externally, right, for an external reason, and intrinsically because you enjoy it in itself. And of course, everything can be a combination. Like, for example, I love teaching, but I also get paid to teach, right? So it's a nice combination of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Another perspective that we have is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This was a theory proposed by Abraham Maslow, one of the more famous psychologists, right? Definitely one of the more like prominent names. And what he proposed is that we have this kind of basic pyramid or hierarchy, and that we move up the hierarchy one level at a time. So we always start with the like basic needs at the base of the pyramid, and then we move up as those needs are met, and we can move to like loftier level goals. So first, we're motivated by things like food, water, shelter, oxygen, sleep, things that if we don't meet those needs, we won't survive, right? So those are very basic physiological needs that he would say we meet first. Then once those are met, we move up to safety and security, which might be having a roof over your head, having some sense of normalcy in your life. Then love and belonging, acceptance, right? Having meaningful relationships with other people. Once that's met, we move up to achievement, education, competence, respect. And then finally, at the top of the pyramid, we have self-actualization, where we're trying to fulfill our potential, kind of be all that we can be. So according to Maslow, we start at the bottom, and our main motivation is to meet our basic needs and then slowly progress up the hierarchy as we go. I like this. I saw this, right? Basic needs at the bottom, ice cream, followed by technology, then social media, then television, right? And then emotions, and then we're at 100%. Another basic theory, another one, right? Again, more theories, so many different theories, is that we are driven by instincts. So instincts are kind of specific innate knowledge about how to survive, things that we're born with. And Freud talked a lot about instincts in his theory, in his psychoanalytic theory. He talked that we basically have two drives or instincts, the life and death drive, right? A drive toward like life and passion and sexuality, and a drive toward death and aggression, and that we spend our whole life kind of balancing those two different drives, right? So according to this perspective, we are kind of born with something in place that's going to kind of promote our survival through the pursuit of these different instincts, that everything that we do is in the interest of protecting our own interests, and that everything kind of functions in this complementary manner and ideally has some degree of balance. Right. So those are kind of the basic theories as to what motivates us. And of course, each one is going to be kind of relevant to different circumstances or situations, different people, different times, right? So together, they probably explain what motivates us. Let's look at a couple of different motives, specifically things like hunger and the need to belong, and then motivation at work, things that take up a lot of our time and energy. Hunger, I would say this is my favorite motive, but I don't like being hungry. I like satisfying the motive of hunger, especially with a nice chocolate cake, of course. There's a big difference between being psychologically or mentally hungry and our biological need for food, right? Our need for food would be the motive of hunger. And there are parts of the brain, right, that are involved in like detecting whether or not we're hungry or full. Namely, the hypothalamus is a big center in the brain that plays a big role in eating and in hunger. But there are things that are far beyond our physical cues for hunger. Hunger is motivated by a lot of different factors, psychological and environmental factors. Have you ever looked at the clock and been like, "Oh, I should eat because it's this time of day," right? Like, "Oh, it's noon, so I'm going to eat." Like, I tend to wait to eat breakfast until like 10 or 11 o'clock. So despite the fact that I'm hungry at 8, I might wait 2 hours because I'm waiting for a time of day. Or if I smell some cookies being baked or there's like a delicious cake somewhere in my environment, I might not be hungry, but I will find room. So the point that I'm making is that hunger can very much be influenced by like psychology, even cultural events, right? Like your habits that you have, and your family plays a big role as well. Your family will have a dynamic and a culture related to food and eating and hunger. For example, my family, huge sweet tooth family. Right, like my family's always eating desserts. We have dessert constantly, and it's usually immediately following dinner because why not? We have room. Versus my partner's family has a lot of diabetes that runs in her family. And so they don't tend to eat a lot of dessert. I've been slowly working on them over the last like 20 something years, and now they have dessert more typically. But it's interesting how even like your family dynamics and your family environment can also shape when you eat, what you eat, and how much you eat. A couple of examples of when psychology overwhelms biology are eating disorders. And there are kind of two main eating disorders, with the third one that was added in the DSM-5 text revision. But we namely look at things like anorexia or anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and then the third one was binge eating disorder. And in all three of these cases, we're looking at psychological factors kind of influencing or overwhelming our biological wisdom. With anorexia, this is when somebody is very underweight. They have an intense fear of gaining weight, so they tend to eat very, very restrictedly, oftentimes having a very distorted image of their body. Bulimia nervosa, a little bit different. This one's sometimes called binge purge syndrome because people eat a massive amount of food in what we would call a binge episode, and then they often compensate for that by purging it in some way, whether that's vomiting or exercising or laxatives. The third one that I don't have on this slide is binge eating disorder, and that's when people binge eat, but they don't purge. And in that case, oftentimes they end up gaining weight since they're not doing anything to get rid of it. But with both of these, right, oftentimes requiring a degree of treatment, being a little bit hard to treat because of how often food comes up, we're looking at cases where biology was overwhelmed a little bit by psychology. Another common thing discussed related to weight is obesity and losing weight or weight control. Obesity is one of the most pressing health problems in America, if not the most pressing health problem. And obesity is technically defined as an excess of body fat in relation to your lean body mass. And this is typically calculated by your height and your weight, sometimes your age as well as factored into this. That's very common. And what they do is they give you a number, a body mass index or a BMI. It's this numerical index calculated from your height and your weight and sometimes your age, sometimes even your body shape and structure. But it's used to help predict health status and disease risk. Every time you go to the doctor and they take your weight, they will give you your BMI, right? They tend to use this as kind of a diagnostic indicator of how, balanced you are with your weight and what you need to potentially do about it or not. A lot of people are trying to lose weight at any given time, right? Like, so we can be overweight, we can be underweight. Losing weight is a pursuit that a lot of people engage in. 2/3 of women and 1/2 of all men report wanting to lose weight at any given time. And those who do manage to do this typically set like realistic goals. They change their lifestyle, they lose weight gradually. I read a book once that said, eat crispy greens rather than Krispy Kremes. It's a nice thought, right? Easier said than done. But typically, what makes losing weight challenging is that our bodies are genetically predisposed to maintain a certain weight. We have what's called a set point, right? This natural point that our body is kind of designed to maintain. And you can push through these in either direction, but your body makes it hard for you. If you've ever tried to lose weight, the first couple of pounds tend to come off pretty easy, and then it's like you hit a wall. That wall is your body's set point. It's your body going, oh, wait, something's wrong. You're losing weight. Let's make you hungrier. Let's slow down your metabolism. And you can definitely push past and reach new set points, but that's what tends to make it hard. So losing weight is something that a lot of people are endeavoring to do. And our culture is obsessed with weight loss medications, right? These have gained so much popularity with surgeries and procedures, and also with things called fad diets. Fad diets are very, very popular in our culture. That's a diet that promises quick results within a short period of time. It requires very little effort or energy or whatever. And there's some ways that you can spot a fad diet. And this is one of the topics that we're looking at in the discussion this week. But anything that claims super fast weight loss, that makes claims that are too good to be true, right? Like you're going to lose 10 pounds in 2 days. It defines foods as good or bad. It requires less than 1,000 calories a day. You need a vitamin or supplement to make up for what you're not having. You eliminate an entire food group. There's no activity or exercise needed. Or my favorite, it's written by someone with absolutely no expertise in weight management. The last couple of things here in this chapter, sorry, I had to pause it for a second there. My dog was losing her mind. The need to belong and then the motivation at work, right? So one very powerful motive that we all possess as people is the need to belong, which we sometimes call belongingness or an affiliation need. People tend to kind of be all over the place in how private they are, how much they enjoy being around other people. Are you kind of more introverted or extroverted? Where do you get your energy? But the vast majority of people really prefer to have strong attachments, close and enduring relationships. Maybe you need a little bit more space than other people, but most of us get a lot of need and kind of purpose in our life from belonging and having deep friendships or romantic relationships, being part of families. So enduring and close relationships. And there are a lot of advantages to affiliation versus being socially excluded. When you are affiliated with other people, it oftentimes gives us a strong sense of like belonging and purpose in our life versus when you're socially excluded, it oftentimes leads to people feeling very lonely, very isolated, very othered or different. And so most people get a lot of like purpose and like drive in their life from having deep relationships or friendships with other people. Another thing that tends to play a really big part in our lives is work. Most of us, right, will work the vast majority of our life. And there is a whole branch of psychology that focuses on the workplace called industrial organizational psychology, or IO psychology for short. And they look at how can we apply psychology to optimizing human behavior in the workplace. And again, a lot of us work, right? It's kind of a necessary evil. And so, how can we optimize our work? What motivates employees? What can we do in order to make sure we're placing people in the right positions? Really fun movie related to this, like older movie, Office Space, if you've seen it, right? I have a little like still of it up here, kind of looking at the Bobs were a great example of industrial organizational psychologists trying to place people in the proper jobs, optimize the workplace, streamline the workplace, all those kind of catchphrases that we often use. But this tends to divide into two different branches. We have personnel psychology that focuses on things like recruiting, selection, placement, training, appraisal, and then worker development. And then we have organizational psychology, which looks at worker satisfaction, productivity, and then facilitating organizational change, like looking at who's doing what and can we make that more efficient somehow? Do we need 3 people all doing this job or can one person do it, right? And oftentimes these people make a lot of money who work in this branch, but they're notoriously unpopular as they're often brought in to help like downsize or let go or like fire people at corporations who might not be necessary. So just kind of something to weigh, right? Very lucrative area of psychology, but oftentimes very unpopular. So that is chapter 9 related to motivation. We looked at all the different theories and then some different motives and kind of how they affect our lives. Don't forget to, of course, read chapter 9 in the textbook. Don't forget to also read through the lecture for chapter 9 and click on and watch any videos or links or anything that are in there. And I'll see you all for the next one on chapter 10.